And of course, today is tax day. You don't need me to remind you, but have you filed your taxes? If the answer is no, well, actually, don't blame yourself because there's actually a really good reason for that. To explain, I spoke to Executive Vice President at the National Taxpayers Union, Brandon Arnold. Brandon, great having you here today. So your organization had a really interesting report released, and of course today is tax day. So tell us what you found in this report.
Yeah, it's really unbelievable how much time people spend on their taxes each and every year. It is such a headache for average Americans. This year, we're projected to spend about 6.5 billion with a B hours completing our taxes. That's individuals, that's businesses, that's everybody. It's a huge deadweight loss. It's a huge time suck that people spend doing their taxes, stressing out, going over those receipts and those forms and so forth. When they could be doing, any number of things, spending time with their family, working. Virtually anything is better than doing your taxes.
And of course, I think I already know the answer to this, but I want to hear from you. Why are people spending so much time on their taxes?
Yeah, unfortunately, the tax code is incredibly complicated. Now, in 2017, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act simplified the tax code quite a bit, and we actually had over 8 billion hours dedicated to doing our taxes back then. So it has fallen significantly down to less than 7 billion, but it is still way too complicated when you're talking about all of the credits, the deductions, the paperwork, the headache. It is very, very complicated for families and businesses alike to complete our taxes. We really need more tax simplification, more dramatic tax simplification to alleviate this massive burden on Americans.
Yeah, I mean, I know what you mean, but why, right? Why is it so complicated? Why can't they just make it as simple as possible for the average American?
Well, I think we try to disperse so much in the way of policy through our tax code. We try to provide incentives for people to work, the earned income tax credit to help the working poor. We try to provide subsidies for people that are saddled with the cost of raising children through the child tax credit. We try to offset the cost of so many things that people do through what has become an increasingly complicated web of tax provisions. Of course, every tax provision has its beneficiaries, whether there's a narrow interest group or a broad interest group, they all have beneficiaries, and therefore it's very difficult to scale back or simplify the tax code, because anytime you talk about eliminating a deduction or eliminating a credit, the people that benefit from it go bananas, and they get very frustrated with the prospect of losing these tax provisions. So tax simplification is an incredibly difficult process. We learned that in 2017. We've learned that in previous years under Reagan and previous presidents. It is a very difficult thing, even though it is very important to help alleviate the burden of tax complexity.
And on that point, what is your organization's view, and what are some suggestions that could potentially help simplify the tax code? Some of your suggestions here, and what could lower the burden on taxpayers, right?
Well, one of the most important things, at the end of 2025, which is coming up very, very fast, of course, we're going to see the expiration of a lot of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Once that expires, you're going to see many, many people, millions of people, shifting from using the standardized deduction, which is a much easier way of doing your taxes, to having to itemize their taxes. And that is when you really have to collect those receipts, collect and keep track of all of your expenditures and so forth, your charitable contributions, because that is required when you itemize your taxes. That will necessitate many people to do a lot more work to get their taxes done. So we need to preserve that larger standard deduction, the larger child tax credit, and other options, other provisions within the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, if we want to make sure that we keep the number of people that have to itemize their taxes as low as we possibly can to minimize the burden of taxation.
All right. Arnold, Brandon, NTUF, thank you very much for your time today.